One other point from the story that was posted yesterday by ESPN.com. He wanted to bring to Atlanta key assistants like Josh McDaniels, Joe Judge, Jack Easterby, and Matt Patricia. First of all, Jack Easterby, anytime Jack Easterby's name shows up in one of these ESPN stories, that means he was one of the sources. He's one of the sources. It's a quid pro quo. He gives Seth Wickersham, Don Van Natta, Jeremy Fowler, whoever, information, and he gets a gratuitous mention to elevate his status at a time when he has none. He was never an assistant coach in New England. He was a guy who parlayed being a chaplain into doing something with, making the players' families happy, and then he goes to Houston and tries to take over. I'd be stunned if he was going anywhere with Belichick at the next step, if there is one for Belichick. But for McDaniels, Judge, and Patricia, at one point, Blank asked Belichick why those guys failed elsewhere, and Belichick said they were better soldiers than generals, which is kind of a tough thing to hang on some of your top lieutenants. And my reaction to it is very simple. They didn't know how to be generals because he is not a good general. He's not a good leader of an organization. He's a great game day coach, and that carried him a long way. But when it comes to creating the culture, getting the guys on board, remember, Matt Patricia goes to Detroit. First thing he does is he takes on Darius Slay and pisses him off, and Slay wants out. Well, that's how Bill would do it. No sacred cows. Goes after Tom Brady. This is what I do. I go after the biggest, baddest guy in here to show I'm in charge. It doesn't work unless you win. If Matt Patricia had come out of the gates and gone, 12-4, it would have been okay. If Josh McDaniels would have kept winning after he started 6-0, it would have been okay. It doesn't work if you don't win. If you don't win, they come after you quickly, which they all witnessed, Chris.
They did. Well, and he changed over years, right? I mean, again, we'll watch early years press conferences. He's not the same person as he was later in the year. He's affable. He's laughing with the media. He's saying jokes, all of that. He got older, became more of a curmudgeon, got sick of people prying into his business, and he became worse that way, certainly. I don't disagree. Now, I'm going to disagree with you in that I think he's a great general. I don't think he's great at teaching others how to be a general, right? And I think it's a little bit why he's such a great general, though, too, right? He's not necessarily great at, letting those guys in on all the things he's done and the decisions and why he did that. He ran that because he was like, wait, I'm the general. They only have to worry about that group of soldiers there. They don't need to worry about everything. I'm the general. And he was very much like that. And I think that's part of the reason a lot of those guys failed is they didn't really realize, right, what Bill was doing in totality and decisions and why he made this and why he did that. And Bill, to your point with Patricia and what he did in Detroit, was not that hard line early on in his career when he hadn't won games and won championships and all that. He was more of a player's guy. And he's more of a player's guy than he gets credit for in general anyways. But, where I think he, has failed in that sense is that, he didn't open his door and teach some of his guys the full capacity of what it is to be a head coach and what he does and everything there. And that's where he's not the best, right? And I think part of that is probably tactical competitiveness, and part of it's like, wait, to run this organization the best way, I need to be the general, and my soldiers need to worry about those soldiers over there and not worry about everything in the whole army, right?
Do your job.
So there's a little
Do
there.
Your job.
Right, exactly.
That's it.
Right.
Do your job.
Right.
But look, so, I mean, my point is,
I know, your point's
whether
not
it's Judge
wrong. Right.
or Patricia or McDaniels, you see what he does, and you emulate that when it's your opportunity. And I think between the two of us, we're coming to a consensus here, as we often do. What Belichick failed to do was sit down with these guys before they took their next job and say, now, look, you see me act a certain way now, but I couldn't have gotten away with that when I got started.
Right.
You can't walk in the door acting this way.
Right.
You can't. This is a product of being successful. You can wall yourself off. You can create this top-down hierarchy where you're firmly in charge. You can acquire more power with winning, and you can be a way that is more effective when it comes to keeping you successful, and you don't have to trust people and you don't take chances that way. But, he didn't not telling him that.
No.
He doesn't want to equip somebody to go out and beat him. That one game that he plays against his former assistant, if he loses it, that ends up being the game that may keep him out of the playoffs or keep him from having home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So That's part of being a good general. And this is always one of the struggles in the NFL. We've talked about this before with Shanahan. Like, how many of the secrets do you really share with that guy?
Yeah.
That
you
know is going to be a head coach in a big game against you at some point.
I saw Josh McDaniel.
How much do you reveal?
I saw Josh McDaniel do that, as far as when he was the offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots, right? He'd go in a room, the rest of the offensive staff, and he'd come out, and sometimes you'd hear assistant coaches like, oh, I do this and I do that, and we should do this in our offense. And then, they got jobs later on in life. And I'm like, well, you didn't do that. Like, you thought Josh was not that good, and Josh is killing it still. And, you're not going to have that job that long. Right. But he would go in there because he wasn't going to let that rest of that staff, right, figure out exactly how he was digging out film and figuring out the plan and all that. It is a very real thing in the NFL. It is. It's protecting your ground. It's protecting, hey, this is what makes me great. This is why I'm the guy I am. I don't want to just tell everybody, hey, you want to be great too like me? This is my trick, right? So there's that very competitive aspect of that in an organization where it's not necessarily good for everybody, right? But that's how it works because of the competitiveness of the whole thing, anyways. And Mike, I told you yesterday, I had heard from, people. I worked in New England. I've known that crew up there for a long, long time, right? I had heard from people connected to those people that, I was led to believe that, hey, Belichick's got something cooking, like I told you yesterday, and he's getting the guys back together. The band's getting back together, and something's going to go on. Now, I didn't know it was Atlanta, but that's what I thought it was because, of course, that's what we kind of thought it would be all along. That was the rumors that were out there because people that were connected to those people were hearing that. And that was certainly a name I heard, but I didn't know for sure. But obviously something changed there. And that, again, does give this conversation between Blank and Belichick, no matter what the sources of the sources say, where I'll give them credit here, is it obviously was real. It's tangible. We know that. It went down a path far enough to where Arthur Blank was certainly thinking about it, and then something happened, whether that's Kraft call or whatever else. But, it's interesting, and it was interesting that it was that close.
With or without the Kraft call, there was no way Arthur Blank was going to upset his organization to get Belichick in there and trust that Belichick was just going to gladly accept being the coach and work in a structure where Terry Fontenot is the general manager. And Rich McKay, even though he's been moved out of day-to-day operations with the Falcons, he's still there. And he's still the guy who's talking to Blank on a regular basis. So that's just part of the reality. One last point. I keep saying one last point, but this is the last one, then we're going to take a break. Another item in the story is that Robert Kraft wanted to make this move a year ago. Jonathan Kraft, his son, and the team president talked him out of it. And that was the year where it all went sideways with Matt Patricia, the de facto offensive coordinator, and everything that happened with Mac Jones. I mean, it really is surprising in hindsight they didn't just end it then. And they probably wish they had ended it then. And I don't know why they waited. Maybe it was one more year to get Gerard Mayo ready. I don't know. But it would have been better for everyone probably if they just wouldn't have had last season. Yeah, they would have just ended it after 2022.
The problem was they were, even with all that crap, and we talk about, and really I'm going to say it, is the greatest coach in the history of sports. But that was still one of the dumbest decisions I've ever seen by any great coach doing that. And I try to say that respectfully, even though that doesn't come out that way. Because I respect.
We said it at the time. If anybody else was doing this, we would say, have they lost their minds?
And even with all that and how crazy it was, they were there in the last game of the year, win in Buffalo, and you go to the playoffs, right? I mean, we can't forget that. I mean, they won that game. They go 9-8. They're going to be in the playoffs. And I think that's probably why Jonathan Kraft was probably give it one more shot too. And it's crazy to think about that 2 years ago, where as bad as that offense was, they still almost got in the playoffs because Belichick, the defense was still good, and they figured out how to manage games to a point, to your point, where they still were competitive and beat some teams that they probably shouldn't have beat.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.